focuses on young people here in the Denver metro area, and we are really working to try to capture some of the experiences in Grand Junction, in the northern part of the state, in sort of rural agricultural communities, and in resort amenity communities. So there are currently 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States, and 1/5 of these are what we consider 1.5 generation. That means they migrated before the age of 16 and are under the age of 35. About 80% of these are immigrants from Latino origin. The bulk, nearly 60%, are immigrants from Mexico. The sort of political context for undocumented young adults and really all undocumented immigrants is layered. And so at the sort of federal level or at in the national context, there is currently no pathway to citizenship for undocumented young people. But there are several sort of key laws and court decisions that shape their integration experiences, or sort of how they are included in the country. One of the most important being in 2012, the announcement of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, and I will talk a little bit more about the details of that program. It's the focus of this research. Intersecting with the federal level are state contexts. So what are laws and policies in a state like Colorado? State level laws and policies can include laws like Arizona's SB 1070, which was a very restrictive state level law that made daily life difficult for undocumented immigrants, things like renting an apartment, getting a license. All of those are sort of not things that are available to all undocumented immigrants in the same way. In my particular area of focus, college access laws are really important, state level laws. So once a young person graduates, undocumented young person graduates from high school, there is no guarantee that they will be able to go on to college and be able to pay in-state tuition, which makes a huge difference in sort of pursuing a college pathway. So states vary. In the United States, there are about 15 states that offer in-state tuition to eligible undocumented immigrants to attend college, and there are 3 states that have some form of educational ban. For example, in Southern California, South Carolina, undocumented young adults are banned from attending any public college or university in the state. In Georgia, they can't attend the top 3 public colleges and universities, and they must pay out-of-state tuition, which averages 3 times as much. And so a lot of my research has looked at the effect of these types of college access laws on the educational pathways of undocumented young adults. The last really important area at the state level are access to driver's licenses, and different states have different laws. I'll talk about what Colorado looks like, but just an FYI, since we're in Colorado, Colorado does have a college access law called the Asset Bill, which allows for in-state tuition for eligible undocumented immigrants, but we don't offer any form of state or institutional financial aid, so it makes it costly to go to college. And the state does allow undocumented immigrants to have driver's licenses, but these driver's licenses are marked with a black bar that clearly indicates that these are not to be used for federal identification. So it's a mixed context, which I'll talk about. And then at the sort of city level, there's different sort of approaches in terms of sanctuary cities, which we've heard a lot about, I think, in the past couple years, or rule of law cities, those cities that say our local law enforcement will partner with immigration. The undocumented youth movement has made significant gains in the past 18 years or so to secure more sort of rights and benefits for undocumented young adults in particular, and undocumented immigrants more broadly. And again, to sort of kind of capture what this context looks like for undocumented young people, there's sort of varying, what I've identified in other work, kind of varying levels of openness for welcoming immigrants. And I characterize in a couple of articles California as very welcoming, Colorado as a state sort of mixed, and Georgia as a sort of hostile political context. So this kind of underscores a really important aspect of the research that I do, which is that place matters for where undocumented young adults live and grow up. The political context in Colorado is mixed, as you can see, or moderately welcoming, because of sort of the sort of layout of the state, taking Denver as perhaps a more welcoming, within the state of Colorado, a more welcoming context. But as you move out away from the metro area, you see a sort of more hostile context emerge. Colorado was one of the first states to pass one of these Show Me Your Papers laws in the 1990s, so SB 90. It took a long time for the college access law, ASSET, to pass, and as I mentioned already, we have marked driver's licenses. There's been a shift in the 2000s, as I understand, for some of the research that I've been doing, to move toward being a more welcoming place for undocumented immigrants, but I think there's still more work to be done. To date, 681,000 young people across the country have received DACA. DACA allows eligible young people to have a 2-year stay of deportation. So that means if they were to get pulled over, say driving their car, with DACA, in theory, they would not be eligible for deportation. They'd be safe, and they have also been able to be eligible for work permits, so they have been able to find legal work. In Colorado, there are about 17,000 DACA recipients, and a national survey found just as recently as 2017 that with DACA recipients have been able to significantly increase their economic outcomes, and that matters because they're buying stuff, they're buying cars, they're buying homes, and local states are seeing some of the return of that increased economic spending power. Despite these significant gains, the Trump administration announced on September 5th, 2017 that the DACA program would end in March 2018. And the current state is sort of this, that undocumented young people, DACA recipients, are eligible to renew their DACA for another 2 years, but no new applications are being accepted. And DACA is currently being sort of decided and litigated in the courts, in the appeals court actually out in Texas. So for now, it's kind of a program that is continuing to exist, but there is significant uncertainty. And in my work, we've completed thus far, I think, about 50 surveys with DACA recipients across the state. We're working hard to get a larger N, as people say, but we've also been able to complete 27 interviews, 20 in the Denver metro and Boulder areas, and 7 actually out in Grand Junction. And so you can see here that some of the benefits of DACA are that people are changing their jobs. So Arnulfo shares, my first job as a DACA recipient was at Chick-fil-A, and I had the pleasure of working there for a good 7 to 8 months. But he decided that wasn't the best pathway, so he moved to Best Buy, where they took him in as a Geek Squad agent, and from there I've grown and developed as a person. And so now he's considering pursuing a master's degree in electrical engineering. Christina, who's one of our older DACA recipients, who's 33, said that it's been incredibly helpful to her family as a mother, living in Grand Junction, where I think public transportation may or may not be as readily, the infrastructure is not as strong out there, I think. And so it's changed her life in what seems like a seemingly small way, in that she's been able to get a driver's license and doesn't have to rely on others for work or for rides anymore, especially in the winter. So she said it's helped my family a lot in terms of transportation and getting a better job. I think one of the things that we're finding that's really important are the emotional impacts of DACA. So Christina again says, yes, I'm more confident. I can do stuff by myself instead of depending on others. Deyanira emphasizes that I feel like it made me more believe in myself. And Nico shared that he's not having to worry anymore about whether or not if he goes out to look for a job, if that particular employer would hire an undocumented immigrant. There have been some limitations, and some of these limitations are unique to Colorado, and many recipients, like Christina, and others, always in every interview we've done so far, people talk about the marked driver's license, and that continues to be a reminder to them that they belong but not fully belong. So they're included but not really included. And some have aspirations to enter professions like aerospace engineering or to become a diplomat that require U.S. citizenship. And so that Daca is not a pathway to citizenship. It is not formal legal citizenship. So they've had to adjust their career expectations, which actually echoes work, some of my previous research that I found with undocumented young people in California. But I think one of the most important things is that the temporary nature of Daca, the 2-year kind of length of the eligibility, as Deyanira noted, there's an expiration date to the things that you want to do. And these sort of seemingly things that we might take for granted, like being able to go out with friends to get a drink, Ernesto talks about. I'm not saying that the inability to drink would ruin my life, because he's thinking about how he might lose his ID if he didn't have Daca, but it's still just another aspect which comes back to the inclusion. So he has friends, he's a student at CU Boulder, who want to go to Europe for the summer, and he cannot travel with Daca out of the country because he might not be readmitted. So, to just sort of summarize where things are at now with deferred action, it's still in place, but the program's future is uncertain. And the question that I'm really looking at, both just sort of for my research agenda and in this particular study, is how do young people, especially undocumented young adults, manage this uncertainty? And so related to this particular project, I am, with the help of a wonderful group of undergraduates and graduate students, conducting a study both here on this campus, on the Auraria campus, about the academic experiences of undocumented young adults. And I hope that project yields some very specific recommendations for best practices in terms of what can colleges and universities be doing to facilitate the academic success of undocumented young people. But I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Well, I'll stand, and hi everyone, thank you for being here. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about a trip that we've been involved in over the past 2 years to the border in Arizona. And I'll speak for a few minutes, and then I'm going to let Rebecca say a few words, and the students at least say a few words, and we'll end with some slides, and hopefully we can squeeze all that into 20 minutes. We'll do our best. So central to our department mission is getting students into the community in creative ways. And in political science, that sometimes means interning at the Capitol and doing more traditional political work. But increasingly what we try to do is get students into activist roles in events and activities involving human rights activism. And so it occurred to me that this was a perfect opportunity to partner with, not only with other universities, but with some community organizations to get students actively involved. And you'll hear from the students in a minute about how the trip impacted them. So we partner with DU's Latin American Center. We partner with Regis University's Service Learning Center, and our other partner is the Denver Justice and Peace Committee, who Rebecca is the director of, and she's going to say a few words soon. So there's a big group of us. It's not just the 8 or 9 of us from UCD. It's really a group of more like 30 or 40 people. And the trip itself happens in November. What makes it so easy is that it's only a weekend. So we leave early Friday morning and we're back Sunday night. So it's not a big ask for the students to get a weekend to go. And then that makes it convenient. It also makes it affordable. And so we're also fortunate to be able to, beg for enough funding to. I think that we won a diversity inclusion grant from Marjorie. Thank you so much for that. That was a bulk of our funding for last year. And we're fundraising again. If any of you have any ideas, we will beg. I'll say a couple words about the trip itself. We arrive in Phoenix and we visit an organization called Puente, which is a civil rights organization. Puente did a bulk of the community activist work in resistance to SB 1070 that Professor Bergshager just mentioned. And they were very successful in resisting SB 1070 and organizing the community. And when you go to Puente, there's a variety of activities happening. There's a youth group, there's a women's group, it's really, for the students, it's really eye-opening. There's people as young as 13 or 14 who are organizing their communities. And then from there we go to visit the Shadow Rock UCC Church. Shadow Rock has had more people living in sanctuary at that church than any church in the nation. 2 years ago there were 3 gentlemen living there, and this past year there was just one. He was also there the previous year, and I believe is still there. So has been there for 2 years or more now. And the students get to meet and talk to the people living there and learn about what sanctuary is, both from the people who live there and also from the staff who organize it. And from there it's off to a vigil at a detention center in the desert, which is about 50 miles outside of Phoenix. In the middle of the desert there's a 10,000 person immigrant detention center. And there's about 2,000 people that go to the vigil. We end the vigil by sort of encircling the center. We can't get very close to it, only a couple of football fields away, but we sing and we light candles. And one of the things that happens is the little lights where the cells are start turning on and off. And you can see that the detainees see us and hear us. And we always feel when we leave as if, well, we get to leave and they don't. But maybe that moment gives some hope and some inspiration. And then from there we go to Nogales and we have a march to the wall, the border wall. And the rally happens on both sides of the wall. The wall's about 20 feet high, and there's about 4-inch gaps between each steel beam, so we can see each other, we can even shake hands with each other. Last year a guy brought a volleyball and we tried to play volleyball over the wall. It didn't work because it was too high. But there's music, and then there's a series of workshops. So it's a jam-packed 3 days, and we're getting ready. We have a group of 9 or 10 going this year. And I'm going to leave it at that and let you hear from Rebecca and the students, and then we'll end with some slides. And thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Zuniga, and I'm the director of the Denver Justice and Peace Committee, which is an organization that promotes international solidarity here in Denver. We've been around for about 40 years and building community here in Denver in solidarity with people in Latin America. Over the years, we've done different countries. We've had solidarity with different countries. In the 80s was the Central American struggles. Right now we focus a lot of our work in human rights and environmental justice, especially looking at a corporation here and trying to make it accountable is Newman Mining Corporation that has the second largest open pit mine in Latin America, in Peru, and is trying to kick out people from their ancestral lands, and that's one of the struggles that we have. But part of our international solidarity work is to work together with the School of the Americas Watch movement. And they've been around for about almost 30 years, and they came about because Father Roy Bourgeois, who lived near the military base, which is which is now called the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security, WINSEC. So they changed their names because of the human rights abuses that they have been accused of, cleaned up their facade, but they continue training military personnel from Latin America and have been responsible for training most of the dictators in Latin America, like Pinochet, Rios Montt, that have been responsible for huge massacres of communities and indigenous communities. So part of the work that we've been doing over the last 3 years is raising awareness of the militarization of our countries in Latin America and the effect of US policies and how our policies affect migration. And to bring that to home is that we decided to move our vigil that we've had every year for the last 3 decades to the border. And we go there for a couple of days, as Jim said, and we raise awareness of what the border is doing to the communities at the border, but also what it means to have that border, and why it is that people migrate because of our policies. So we try to raise awareness about all those issues, and the students can tell you more about it because they have lived it and they have experienced it themselves, and it really is a life-changing experience for those that have never had the opportunity to go to a border town. So I appreciate all of you that have supported this initiative in the past, and I hope that you will continue doing it. This year it will be again in Nogales, and it's on both sides, and obviously for several reasons, most of the students stay in the US side, but those of us that can actually go to the Mexico side have the opportunity to go to workshops that are held there with communities that are unable to cross the border to assist workshops that happen in the US side. So what we do with this is try to build community, promote international solidarity, and awareness about our policies and our military policies around the world, but in particular Latin America. So I'll leave it to the students because they have more to say. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrea. I went to Border Watch in 2016 together with Michelle and about 4 other of our classmates. When I signed up to take the trip, I didn't know at the time just how much it would affect me. I was, just interested in immigration, subjects of immigration. My family has been shaped by immigrants, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to learn about, why people migrate, learn about the effects of the militarization of the border. But it affected me a lot more than I thought it would. When we went, what really had stood out to me was when we went to the vigil at I think it was Elroy detention. Yeah, the detention camp. There were people there giving their testimonies of when they were in there and they had gotten out due to family members getting them out or whatever. And there was a woman who had said that she had a miscarriage at 8 months inside the detention center, and that she had begged for help because she was in so much pain, and they ignored her cries, and they just told her to drink water, and she ended up losing the baby. There were other people who were begging the community to call ICE to have them release their family members. There were people holding up photos of family members who died inside the detention center, all of them mysteriously by suicide. And then when we went towards the camp, like Professor Walsh said, we can't stand too close to it, but you can see the lights inside. And we were singing and everything, I was learning the chants along with my other classmates, and then they started flicking the lights on and off. And that really got to me emotionally because it made me realize that there are actual, thousands of people in there that are trapped in there, and they were just in there because they were trying to find a better life for themselves and their family. And they were hearing us, and they were, I can't imagine how they must have felt to know that there are still people on the outside fighting for them inside. We went to the church that had the sanctuary. That was one of the first places we went to, and there was a man in sanctuary whose name I've unfortunately forgot, and he was talking about how one of his cousins had gotten deported back to the South American country he was from, and that they murdered him viciously, and he knew that ICE was after him next, and he knew that he was going to be murdered if he was deported back, and he would rather live his life in sanctuary, of course, than be brutally murdered back in his own home country. I had to take these experiences with me, and I just couldn't forget them. I couldn't just forget all these things that I heard from like real people. And it made me become more of try to be more of an activist in immigration, for immigrant rights, for people that are just trying to find a better life here. Going through the process of immigration with my husband, I learned that there's a lot of restrictions in place for people who want to do things the right way, the legal way, as many anti-immigration activists say that they should have come the right way. But there's so many things in place that prevent people from doing that. There's not enough opportunity for them. And it's kind of influenced my decision now to get into immigration law. I've graduated from CU Denver already, and I've really been looking into it. I've gotten a lot of support from my family. And I hope to just make a difference in someone's life, so that they don't have to live their whole lives in a detention center just looking for a better life for their family. That's all I have to say.
Alright, so my name's Michelle. I went with Andrea to the border trip on fall 2016, and I went on this trip because I just wanted to learn something new. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but this trip has really impacted me because I myself am an immigrant from Germany, but this trip has showed me that people, I have it much better than other people who are immigrants from South America. They have it a lot worse than I do, and this trip has impacted me, and it has helped me make a decision that like I do want to go to law school and practice immigration law in the future down the road, especially going to the sanctuary and meeting those 3 guys there, and now it's only 1. That is like really impacted me and showed me that like I could help make a difference in someone else's life who has it much worse than I do with immigration. And something that like really hit me is that like when I was talking to Professor Walsh before this all started, I was asking him about this picture and the slideshow I put together, and he told me that there was only 1 guy left in the detention center and in the sanctuary, and then one of the guys, you told me that he actually left one night to see his family and got caught by ICE. And yeah, that like kind of hit me like, okay, they're still there, but there's only 1 of them, and I would really want to help them get out one day. Like I want to help people like have a better life, because like Andrea mentioned that even people trying to do it the right way, it's so many restrictions on immigration, and it's such a life-changing trip to where I didn't even realize that like when the campaign was going on and Trump was talking about building a wall at the US and Mexico border, there is already a wall, and that made me realize like, oh, it's already there, but he just shined some spotlight on it, but he just wants to expand that. And that part of the trip also touched me, is seeing the wall that is like visibly there, standing there. And I just think this trip is life-changing, and other people should actually go on this trip and learn something, because the political science department here has some excellent classes, but this is a whole entire different way of political science. This is not just something from a textbook that you can read and like understand. This is something you need to go experience, because it'll impact you. Like I still remember every single day of that trip when I think about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Let Colin say a couple of words, and then we can end with the slides.
I totally relate to what you just said, Michelle. Reading about it in books and going to class, it's much different than like seeing these structures. Like the detention center we went to, I grew up in the Bay Area and I remember Alcatraz, and this is like Alcatraz in the desert with like these really nasty floodlights. It's really, just seeing that firsthand had an impact. And also the wall, like Michelle said, seeing these things just made me want to go inside of a dark room and just cry and everything. And then we listened to people's stories. I especially remember this one man, the one remaining guy in the sanctuary church, told his story, and I got really emotional and cried, and I think other people did. And later on, we went and talked about it in class, and one of my classmates, Alex, she started talking about how just about how this happens all the time. That why are people so shocked about this story? Like, this is so common, and I kind of got defensive about that. Like, you know, how dare you get mad at me for having emotions or whatever. But it struck me, and I got to thinking about it later, about how, like, my tears and my, like, wanting to go, like, disavow, you know, this stuff and, like, shriek about how it's immoral or whatever, it's not doing anything. And what does matter is, you know, action. What is to be done? My crying is irrelevant when people actually go through this stuff. So for me, it was just like I realized, like, the urgency and how, you know, what I've been doing is not helping anybody. I need to be more active. Yeah.
Thanks, Colin. So we'll end with some slides, and then we can just open it up for questions.
Hold on. There it is. Okay. So yeah, that's the one guy who's still left at Sanctuary that we were talking about.
And that is my daughter Luna, by the way.
And then
Those are some murals that are in the Puente organization on the wall outside the Puente organization. And that's Puente. The guy in this photo, in the center, he led the charge against SB 1070. He's a pretty amazing organizer. And this is the vigil at the detention center.
And then, like, one of the signs says, "If I die in ICE custody, don't believe their lives." Like that. That is something really powerful.
You're going very fast.
Yeah.
Obama's families to their deaths.
That just seemed, for me, I remember that sign, it was
Yeah.
just because there's so much, I mean, rightfully, I think so much antagonism towards the Trump administration, but we should also be aware that during the Obama administration, there were a lot more deportations than even in the previous administration. There were so many,
Like signs and people, like there was
there were a lot of
people.
organizations there too, like for immigrant rights.
I guess you can see, like, right here, there's another organization, and then
It's a lot of faith groups.
like on the bottom corner right over that side, bottom left, that is one of the stories they're talking about, how a guy is in detention, I think. Yeah,
They have
detention.
numbers that you can call, and they would ask you, like, please call this number and ask them to release my son, my husband, my brother,
My
wife,
cousin, my uncle, you know.
our parents. There was a little kid there advocating for his. He was like maybe 5, and he was asking people to call to have him release his dad.
And then here's like the candlelight vigil, and then we were all singing and chanting songs. And that is the detention center. With all those lights in there, those were all the people were, and they would like sometimes either like raise their blankets and close them out, like even use bed sheets.
Yeah, they use their. I remember seeing some people use their blankets because I think I assume that they made the lights stay on inside because they didn't like people being able to control their lights. So people ended up using their sheets to lift up and down just to like kind of show us that they were there.
Yeah. And then this was like day 2 of the workshops and going to the border. And the pictures didn't show up again. Oh, this was like the bottom left-hand corner. This was someone like advocating for justice, and they were like showing pictures of like their organization And then we had like a bunch of people there that came out too. There were a lot of people.
This gentleman in the blue shirt is Father Roy Bourgeois. He started the School of the Americas protest. And he's there marching. He takes time to meet with the students.
Yeah, we got an interview with him.
Got to meet a legend.
He was thrown out of the Catholic Church for advocating the ordination of women. And he's quite a rebel.
You can see like in one of both the pictures on the left-hand side that this was during the campaign, and it showed all the Republican candidates on that poster. So that's like showing emphasis to what's going on right there. This is where, when we got to the border, on the top left-hand corner, that's where like the check-in point is, and then you can see just like how tall the border is and like how far it goes, and like how you can see people between it. And then on the other side was like an actual like community, like big community. And then there's some pictures of like, to give you an idea of what it looks like with the border of Mexico on the other side. And then this is from like the fall of 2017 that Professor Walsh sent me. And you can see like they're looking through the wall at the other people. That's another picture from fall 2017 with the guy again who started the School of America's Watch. This is day 3. They were having like a little bit. This is like, there was the guy at the School of America's Watch right there again. He got a little bit older. He's there again. But like, it's good to see him that he almost met up with you guys again. Then day 3, there were like some events happening at the border and like music and
Puppet
shows. That was really interesting to watch.
Not like hand puppets, but like these tall, like paper mache puppets that told the story of immigration, like
Yeah.
reasons why people immigrated.
Like there were also some signs everywhere, and it was just so colorful to see like how they were telling the story of like white people immigrated. So yeah, you can see part of the puppet show in these pictures, and people were holding like crosses, and I don't remember what that part was for.
They were announcing names of people who died, I think, crossing the border, and they would say the name, and
there would be like presente.
Yeah.
So that was like interesting.
It's like a way to honor the memory.
And then those are the pictures of like the puppets. Like they're huge.
The border agents didn't know what to make of the puppets. Sherry, one of the students last year, she interviewed some of the agents who were right there, and they were very open and friendly, and they would say, "What's up with those puppets?"
Yeah.
I just really like the collaboration of like art along with advocacy here. It was just very creative and just lots of different ways to show people's immigration story.
And then those are the puppets again, how they were telling the story. It was just interesting to watch everything. It was just like happening all around you, like not just in one place, but it would like come from everywhere. And it was just such an interesting like story to watch. And then they would like be playing songs and singing and just telling the story. Like that puppet, that's pretty big. It was like 3-4 people just doing the skeleton puppet and everything. And I don't remember what this was about on the right-hand side. I think that was like...
Oh, it was a border patrol agent.
Yeah, it was border patrol
They would
agents.
like, have these people dressed up as border patrol chasing people around.
Political theater.
Yeah. And then on the right-hand side, there's like 2 hands, and I'm assuming that was the part where they said like, oh, should be like one community coming together.
The puppet show was happening on the other side of the border too.
Yeah.
So it was like 2 sides of it.
Yeah, so, and then the butterflies and everything they had everywhere. It was just interesting to watch, and like seeing like how they had 2 like massive puppets, like with the hands coming together, symbolizing unity. And then here's how like some more puppets, and like of course the singing you see right there, the guys like telling the story and singing, and like everything's just happening around you. It's like so much to watch, like you can't even like take enough pictures to emphasize the story that is going on. And then here's another picture of like the fall of 2017 group, and tear down the wall, build up the people. I remember fall 2016 we were chanting that when we got to the border.
about 15 minutes for questions, and then we'll kind of retreat to our informal lunch and discussion. So please open the floor.
So I'm not familiar with the detention center, and why are people put there, and is there a process for them to get out?
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Karen, sorry. I'm an advisor here in the CLAS department, and I'm fairly new, so.
Okay, so I'll try to attempt to answer your question. So it's very complicated. It's part of the our system of incarcerating people and immigrants, and our for-profit industry that we have in the U.S. So we have a lot of private prisons that hold immigrant detainees, or people that either have crossed the border without authorization or have been arrested already here because they don't have the proper documentation to be in this country. This particular detention center is in the middle of the desert. We actually have one over here in the middle of the city of Aurora, at the end of Peoria and 31st, or something like that. So a lot of people end up going to these different detention centers that are private prisons that we have a quota that we should fill. So many beds in detention. So it's part of a whole industry. Why do these people go into detentions? There are different reasons. And it's all has to do with our immigration policies. Why do we have them in isolated places? Because we don't want them to have access to justice. So that's in a short answer. I don't know if that answers it. Mm-hmm.
In regards to those who have come into the United States, how hard is it to seek asylum now in regards to how it's changed over the last 20 years since the change from economic to more of like Nicaragua, where it's more of a killing?
So that's a good question for an immigration attorney, not for us, but it's an advocate of immigrant communities. Our understanding is that the asylum processes have changed. Everything is backlogged anyway through the immigration processes. So the current administration doesn't, for example, for Nicaragua, they don't have asylum, even though there are issues going on, but it's not recognized yet as a political asylum case. I'm Nicaraguan myself, so I'm following up a lot of the events, unrest going on. So it is very difficult to explain this to people because asylum is not something that you get in one day. People fight for asylum for many, many years, and it depends on the reasons. It's not only political asylum, you have other classes, other particular groups that are able to apply for asylum. It might be someone from fleeing persecution because of their gender identity. So there are different cases and scenarios, and it depends where your case ends up. If you're going to see a judge, or if you're going to do it through I forget the technical name of the other process, but it's through the office. And then you have refugees, which is a completely different process. And that also, I just heard at this Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition conference this weekend that in average, a person seeking refugee status might take up to 17 years just to get to the country that they are applying for. So it's another.
I know you've done extensive interviews in California, and then now you're starting them, but it's still fairly new here in Colorado. What's surfacing so far? Has anything surfaced as central differences between the narratives that are coming out of California versus Colorado?
I think there are a few things that are different. I mean, I think the marked driver's licenses are something that just doesn't exist in California. And so that, I think, is it makes undocumented young people, all undocumented immigrants, kind of feel literally marked, right? So processes in the state to get a driver's license. You were talking about how can people end up in deportation in a detention center? It can be for something, what we might consider a minor traffic violation. Pulling someone over and having them and not having a driver's license in some states like Georgia is the main way that people end up in detention centers, and places I'm sure here too. So here in Colorado, I think there's only 3 DMV offices that will process driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, and the wait list can be long unless you're willing to drive out to Grand Junction. People have told me if you want to go out to Grand Junction, you might be able to get it in a couple days. So just sort of the processes, the bureaucratic processes in the state versus California, which has, I think, developed more infrastructure in some places to support undocumented immigrants. The biggest difference for the group that I interview, undocumented students, is lack of access to state financial aid to pay for college, especially those that are enrolled. So that is something that is offered in California. And so that has made a big difference. Here in Colorado, like I saw in California 10 years ago, you have many instances of undocumented young people taking extended periods of time off from school to work, to save, to pay for another semester, thereby extending the amount of time that it takes to complete college. And as we all know, that can create a situation where you might not actually finish. So that's something unique to the population that I interview. So those are some of the main differences, kind of institutional support and state level policies, bureaucratic processes that make it difficult to manage your day-to-day life in this state.
Within Colorado, I know you're working with collaborating with other higher institutions. Do you find, so what is it about certain higher education institutions that make it sort of more accessible to undocumented immigrants versus other institutions?
So I think, employing a full-time person for whom their job is to work not only with undocumented students, but with their families. So I think that's something that really can impact the day-to-day in-class experiences of students who are undocumented or have Daca. Is sort of what, they in our interviews, they talk regularly about their parents. So MSU, Metropolitan State University, for example, offers a series of legal workshops. They have attorneys come in, and those appointments are available to undocumented students, but also to their parents or other family members that might need support. So it really, employing student affairs staff for whom their primary job, their full-time job, is to support undocumented students in all the different areas of their life, academically, and their family, socially, so providing spaces for students to meet. So I think that the institutions that are doing that well recognize that when a student comes to them, it's not just about their classes per se and signing up and getting it paid, but there are other things going on in their lives that can make it difficult to manage the day-to-day. College, preparing for exams, doing your homework. So I think in California, the UC system has one office at UC Davis Law, where they have lawyers that work with undocumented students and their families.
Other questions?
We have one more of our students, Frida, who made it after class. Do you want to quickly just say a quick word about?
Sure. Hi everybody, my name is Frida Silva. I am a first generation and third year student, majoring in political science and minoring in communication. And I went my first semester of college my first class ever in college was with James Walsh. It was Intro to Political Science, and he was hosting a trip to Nogales, Arizona. And I didn't know really what I was about to embark in, but I knew the issue of immigration was very personal and something that we talk about constantly in my family, as I come from parents who are immigrants. So I wanted to support the cause. I went with James Walsh along with my two peers here, and it was an incredible experience. And I think you do it now yearly, if I'm correct, and so I really appreciate that experience. It's crazy what happens out there in the detention centers, and it's just amazing to see kind of the people who are behind movements to support immigrant rights. So that's kind of what I did.
Thanks, Frida.
Thank you, James.
Right, well, why don't we break and have some lunch and talk to these great presenters, get to know them a little bit better. All right, thank you so much.